Happy to welcome to the show Steve Schmidt, who has a Substack and a YouTube channel called The Warning with Steve Schmidt. Great to see you, sir.
Great to see you all.
Yeah, of course. So Steve and I overlapped at MSNBC way back. So nice to be reconnected with you. And what came across my radar recently is you had a pretty scathing indictment of Joe and Mika over at Morning Joe and their decision to make the trek down to Mar-a-Lago and, as they described it, like restart relations with Donald Trump. And, you know, it was noteworthy to me in particular because you had been inside those circles. I was at MSNBC, never really invited to the Morning Joe Cool Kids table, but you were inside of those rooms and you did know Joe and Mika. So just give us your reaction to their trajectory here.
All right, people, this one is pretty unique and very exciting. We have Steve Schmidt absolutely light up Joe Scarborough and Mika from Morning Joe for what can only be described as a full-on faceplant. These two spent years telling you Trump was Hitler, a fascist, the greatest threat to democracy, and now they're playing nice. Schmidt calls it an act of capitulation, and frankly, he's not wrong. These are the same media elites who claim to stand on principle, yet they're more focused on protecting their seats at the table than actually telling the truth. So let's get into this clip. It's exciting, and we'll break it down as always. Let's get into it.
Well, let me just say, I think that we're in a very dangerous moment in the country. And the simplest way to appreciate what it is that they did, I think, is just to try to comprehend that 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump is out off Hitler, and the country is on the edge of catastrophe. And within days, the person who's making $10 million a year, sitting next to his wife who's making $10 million a year, controlling 4 hours of network television, goes to Mar-a-Lago and makes an act of capitulation on bended knee with head bowed that he condemned over and over and over and over and over and over again in the most strident terms. And when he did that, he undermined every person with clarity and conviction who has looked at this moment and not tried to sensationalize it, but to warn people about it. I agonized over my use of the word fascist because I know its meaning and I know its history.
Gotta give some Schmidt some credit here. At least he's admitting that calling someone a fascist is serious. But Joe and Mika, they threw that term around like it was candy on Halloween. They'd make you believe every single speech Trump gave was straight out of Mein Kampf. If you believe Trump was really a fascist, wouldn't you fight harder to oppose him? Wouldn't you refuse to bow, to bend, to give even an inch? Joe and Mika clearly didn't mean a word of what they said, and they used that rhetoric to fire up their base, get ratings, and sell ads. But when it becomes inconvenient, when they needed to protect their careers, suddenly Trump's not so bad anymore. That is not journalism. That is cowardice. You guys, let me know if you agree with that.
And I know how loaded the term is and its implications applied to a major party candidate. But as I evaluated what Donald Trump said, what he threatened, what he promised, what his acolytes said, their veneration of Viktor Orban, the speeches that heralded replacement theory, the dogmas and the doctrines that were identical to things said 80 years ago, I said to myself, it's appropriate. And I called Trump a fascist. I wasn't alone. Timothy Snyder, the Yale historian and professor, did it. Other people did it. And I think that we did it with care and concern. And Joe Scarborough profoundly undermined that by making it seem cynical, pretend, concocted, political. And there's additional reporting, and I wrote about it today from Puck News, that the motivation, of course, for this is fear. They're terrified. And they went down to Mar-a-Lago, and they did what they had to do to cover and protect their asses.
This is it right here. Joe and Mika are not stupid. They see the writing on the wall. They are terrified of being shut out of the conversation. And that isn't about principle, it's about survival. They're hedging their bets, making nice with the guy they've spent years demonizing because they want to make sure they're still relevant. It's like watching a kid apologize to the bully on the playground because they're scared of getting stuffed into a locker again. Joe and Mika are supposed to be leaders in journalism, the people who speak truth to power. But instead, they're playing politics like everyone else. And the saddest part, their audience sees it and nobody is buying this act.
Which is not the thing to do if you hold a seat which you hold with importance in the hierarchy of American journalism. So Mika justified this by saying it's a big new Brzezinski, a Pole, the Jimmy Carter era national security advisor, would have appreciated this because he was a diplomat and he would have processed this as a diplomatic act. Nonsense. He would have regarded it as a capitulant act.
Mm-hmm.
He would have seen it for exactly what it was. And it has created a profound crisis of credibility at MSNBC, which actually won't exist for very much longer at all as we enter into the early hours of the Trump administration.
Yep.
So they didn't speak up in service of the truth, which would have been brave to sort of buck your audience to say something that's true. They spoke up in service of themselves. My question for you is, did they have any sense that this would effectively nuke the remainder of their audience, which profoundly disagrees with the direction that they're now going?
Well, arrogance is a vice in these things because it distorts your perception, alters your reality. And I think that in their world, you heard them say it, that they've been heralded by their friends and phone calls from around the world while 40% of their audience cratered. And the reality is that they work in the trust economy and they obliterated the trust that they had with their audience because at the core, the show has become married to power. Right? And this is so important to understand. Joe Biden's political advisor should not have been the MSNBC morning host. And his guests, like John Meacham, shouldn't have been the president's speechwriters while pretending to do analysis about the historical meaning of the president's speeches that he was writing. It's an enormous conflict of interest. And all of that accrues until this moment that Joe Scarborough looks into the camera regarding Joe Biden and he says, this is the best version of Joe Biden there's ever been, analytically, intellectually, and anybody who says otherwise, fuck you.
Are you kidding me? Joe Scarborough actually said that on air? Look, I don't care how much you love Joe Biden. Screaming F you to anyone who disagrees with you isn't journalism. It's fanboy nonsense. And this is supposed to be Morning Joe, not Joe Biden's PR hour. And yet here they are, one moment demanding loyalty to Biden, the next moment cozying up to Trump. What's the message here, Joe? Does principle only matter when it's politically convenient for you? This is why people are done with mainstream media. They don't care about the truth. They only care about power. And this is just apparent.
Yeah.
And in that instant, direct quote, he laid down the law that you stay on that side of the line if you want to come on my show, which in the eyes of the national media is a prestige show that makes all sorts of good things happen in their media careers.
That's right.
The problem with that is he is one of the architects of a political disaster in the country that's without precedent. And I say this to audiences all the time. And I don't care if you're a progressive, a conservative, right? This is aimed at functioning adults. Adult life requires you to hold multiple contradictory thoughts in your head at the same time in order to survive it. Donald Trump is the most prolific liar who has ever held a political office in the country, but a plurality of the country thinks he's the most honest candidate they've ever seen because of his authenticity. And so let's look at three things. Who is telling the truth as a practical matter about Biden's fitness? Would that have been Anita Dunn and Joe Scarborough, or would it have been Donald Trump? Who was telling the truth? Who was telling the truth about the condition of the border? Would that have been Anita Dunn and Joe Scarborough, or Donald Trump? And when it came to the economy, a lot of the media was celebrating Joe Biden as FDR 4 months into his term, when we were in an inflationary cycle that was really hurting working class people who remained completely invisible to people like Joe Scarborough, Mika, Brzezinski, who in the end did not use this powerful platform to preach a gospel of idealism. They used it to promote their self-interest, their pet projects. It was cynical, and it's all come undone because the age of access media has ended. And another thing that's ended is this era where, as a trophy, billionaires would match their egos and their hopium and their platitudes with the purchase of a legacy news organization.
Honestly, Schmidt hits the final nail in the coffin with this final points that he's made. For years, media elites like Joe and Mika thrived on their access, rubbing elbows with politicians, billionaires, and power players. But that era is over. People are done with access journalism. They want truth, not spin, and they want accountability, not groveling. And if Joe and Mika think they can survive by flip-flopping like this, they're in for a rude awakening. Their audience sees exactly what's happening and they're not going to forget it. So long, Morning Joe. You sort of played yourself. What do you guys think? Is this the end of Morning Joe as we know it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one.